It is absolutely wonderful to be back in New Zealand after 5 years. This is my first real introduction to the dark sky community 5 years ago. I had such a warm welcome. It's wonderful to be back to see so many friends, people I've worked with in real life, people I've worked with online, and I'm just really excited for this day. Just by a quick show of hands, who's a professional astronomer here? We've got a few. What about an amateur astronomer? Well, what about someone who works in the lighting design community, lighting engineering community? What about conservation community? What about someone who just loves our world? Well, I think we're all amongst friends here, right? So, when I thought about coming back to New Zealand, the thing that really struck me was the landscapes here, right? The open space, the incredible mountains here, the waters here, and in particular, I remember being out on the island north of Auckland and on the beach there, having a stargazing evening and looking up and just being in awe of being able to see not just our own galaxy, but the Magellanic Clouds, and realizing this was our connection to the cosmos. And I was just so happy to learn I was going to be able to come back. The Earth's been around, what, 4.5 billion years? And it's been through many changes over those times. And I don't need to tell everyone here, but the reminder is, one of the constants of our planet are these incredible, wonderful, bright days that give life to so much of us, and those dark, dark nights. That constant beat, now that 24-hour cycle, is one of the great unchanged rhythms of our planet. So much has changed, that's been one of the constants. Clearly that started to change. And it really started to change when we started to use our ingenuity to capture embody energy, capture it so that we could light a little bit of the night, so we could extend our activities beyond the time that the sun set. And we put so much energy into capturing into this little oil lamp, maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000 years ago. We all know now, if I have a light bulb over my head, you know I've had an idea. Literally, the light bulb has become the symbol of innovation. It's got cheaper, it's got a lot brighter, and now so many of us live under perpetual twilight, right? Stuck in this nether space, neither light nor dark, that perpetual twilight in between. This is a great place to go for a couple of days, maybe Las Vegas. I flew over it on my way here, and I would not want to live there. It's a great place to go, it's a great place to get out, and so many of us now, in fact, because of the satellites, Connie will talk about this now, in some way, there's no way that you can really escape the impact of our ingenuity on the sky and the night sky overhead. And I think one of the things, the world has changed in many ways since I was here last. Clearly, COVID really impacted the world globally, and I think one of the things that people found through that, and a lot of people were yearning for those connections, and a lot of people were starting to rediscover the night sky. Either they lived somewhere that they could look up and they could see the stars and the constellations, or for so many people, they were living in a place where the stars were lost. So what does this mean for society? Right, so I'm going to talk a little bit as the overview and the introduction. What is light pollution? Most importantly, we're going to spend most of the time, why care? Right, I'm probably preaching to the crowd here, but why care? And critically, what can we do about it? How can we work together to address this issue? So what is light pollution? Well, it's lots of things. Glare is probably the most obvious manifestation. Who here likes glare, these bright, glary headlights coming towards you, so bright these days that you literally have to turn away? Who likes those, right? I've yet to be in a room where someone actually puts their hand up and says, yeah, I like those. Light trespass, this was a photo I took when I visited Jeff Dai in China a couple of days before. I was in Hong Kong and visited one of the brightest spots in Hong Kong, in Kowloon, and can you imagine your kids trying to get a good night's sleep and head out to school the next day when they're being blasted by that much light in this mixed residential commercial district? Of course, there's sky glow. And I put sky glow last. I think a lot of this field came out the astronomical field, and really sky glow is where it came from. Sky glow, the manifestation of all those unwanted, unneeded, unnecessary lights over our city. The physics of light is literally brightening the night sky, and again, over the skyline of Hong Kong, you can't see any stars there anymore, and in fact the sky both of these cities is visible, as we know, from hundreds of kilometers. It's also a global issue. So 83% of people live under a light blue sky globally, 99% in Europe and North America. I don't know the statistics for New Zealand, but I guess it's probably up in this 80 to 90% given you're an urbanized country.
Only in the cities.
Yeah, but most people live in the cities. Right? So most people live in the cities, right? So they are, and it's quickly from work that Connie and Chris Kreiber led, published last year in Nature, in Science magazine, it's doubling every 8 years, right? I would love my bank account to be doubling every 8 years. It ain't. But the sky is brightening globally by up to 10% per year. Getting doubles every 8 years is a tremendous rate of change. This is a graph that Dan Dorisco from the US Night Sky team shared with me recently that illustrates that. I apologize, he just done the reanalysis for North America. The red bits are areas where over this period of time the night sky had brightened. And what you can really see here is what we're losing. We are losing our naturally dark skies. Rural areas are brightening. Maybe 10 years ago they're naturally dark and we were starting to imperceptibly first lose that. And yes, there are probably areas, probably ignore the northern ones, but there are areas where maybe a mine closed and the skies got darker, or maybe a community did a lighting retrofit, but by and large what we're seeing is the loss of natural darkness, particularly in our rural areas. But why does it matter? Right? It's wonderful to come to a country like New Zealand who gets it, right? You literally now have a national holiday to celebrate the Maori New Year, which is marked when Matariki rises. Now, Matariki, this is Lascaux paintings in France, these wonderful animals, that the Paleolithics were painting in those caves. Now most of these animals are extinct. The Aurochs are actually trying to bring them back. They're no longer part of the landscape of Europe. The scientists believe that, sorry, I messed up there. Can you go back? I don't know. But they were also recording the night sky overhead, right? The night sky is still there. They were recording what we call Matariki down in New Zealand. They were recording Orion, the Taurus, the Pleiades, these important parts of their cosmology and their history and the way that they timed the plantings of their crop. They were recording them in those paintings that they're painstakingly taking time to record. So we've all been astronomers forever, and in fact astronomy was maybe arguably with medicine, one of the first science. It was certainly one of the first big sciences. You've got one of these great instruments just a stone's throw away from here that was abandoned in, where do we hear, Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, somewhere like that, brought here lovingly reassembled. Now, astronomy continues to be a leader. A few months ago I was down in Chile at the La Silla European Southern Observatory, where they're building some of the most remarkable instruments to probe the earliest history of the universe. And even in this remote location, if you go there at night, yes, you can see the Milky Way overhead, but even there, you can see the bright lights of La Sirena in the distance. So think about those photons that have traveled probably billions of light years, given how big those telescopes are. Right at the last minute, they're getting being quashed and washed away because of what we're doing in our world at night. But I want to talk beyond astronomy, light pollution and this crisis that we're living through at the moment that's so important to many of us, the triple threat of pollution, of the loss of biodiversity and climate change, and talk about how light pollution is really related to all of these, and unlike so many of the other issues that we're facing as a global society, how there are simple solutions that are with hand that we can start to enact today that in fact don't save us money. That don't cost us money, they often save us money. And the only thing we lose is glare and bad light. We don't lose anything else. I think when most of us, if we ask someone in the street if they've heard about the impact of light on animals and species, they might have heard about the turtles and how they get disoriented on their path these little tiny animals returning to the ocean to start their life cycle, how they're getting disoriented. But that's just the tip of the proverbial iceberg, right? So much of conservation happens during the day, but so much of life happens during the night. So who's out at night, right? Who will you share it with this planet with? Like 90% of amphibians are active at night, 69% of mammals, 60% of invertebrates, that's the bugs. Interestingly, although birds get a lot of attention, only 30% of birds are actually nocturnal species. You know, there's a notable one here in New Zealand that we'll talk about. You've got some giant bugs here in New Zealand. I think here's the weather, probably one of the largest bugs in the world. I'd love to see one of these. But pollinators really matter, right? Pollinators are the unsung heroes of our planet. Here's a photo of grow light in an open air, in a sense, greenhouse that they're forcing crops there, and there's these insects just being drawn to it, right? Pollinators contribute tremendous economic benefit to society for free. Billions and billions of dollars globally of ecosystem services by pollinating so many of our fruits and vegetables and crops that we rely on. And yet, worldwide, insects are vanishing. This is some data from Germany, who's been a leader in this space. So in 1950, the scientists went out, they put out one trap for one night, and they captured over 50,000 moths. Similar study was done in 1979. One trap, 133 nights, 50,000 moths, but 133 nights. 2000, which is 24 years ago now, remarkably, 19 traps, 123 nights, 56,000 moths, so a precipitous decline. And scientists now tell us we're in the middle of an insect apocalypse. Right? Where does this mean we'll be in 10 years' time? In fact, Germany has passed a national law, so we'll have insect-friendly streetlights, and now they're trying to frantically scramble to figure out what does that actually mean. Birds, this is some data from the US. It's become very prominent at the moment. The number of birds that are dying each year colliding with brightly lit buildings, people hate it. When they come out of their expensive new condo in New York in the morning, they have to sweep up all the birds that collided with it overnight, and clearly they're colliding with those buildings in those glass windows. We now know that one of the top predictors of where birds are stopping is sky glow. So it's not enough just to turn the lights off in your building. You have to be thinking at a regional scale so that you can diminish that sky glow so that the birds can continue on their migrating path. But it's beyond birds, the aquatic ecosystem. This is a bridge in California, a wonderful bridge by La Calatrava over the Sacramento, which is a salmon-bearing river. That bridge was brightly lit. They determined that those lights on those bridges were actually affecting the migration of the salmon, which is an endangered species in California. So now they turn those lights off during that salmon migration season. Most of our kids, if you've got kids, you've probably watched Finding Nemo a number of times. We now know that the clownfish, the eggs of the clownfish, when it's exposed to even relatively dim levels of light, will not develop. No more clownfish if they live in a light-polluted world, even at dim levels. We're not talking about shining a floodlight on them, right? And it extends to corals, everything, right? We're changing the growing seasons in our cities, into woody plants. A study that came out, many of us who worked in ecology are familiar with the heat island effect, where plants in warm cities think spring happens earlier and fall is happening later, and they extend their growing season, which is, well, maybe for the plant it's great, the ecosystem it's a disaster. We now know that if you are a plant in a highly light-polluted city, the impact is similar. And these are compounding. It's not you get to choose which impact. You're feeling both. And light pollution clearly is a lot easier to deal with than the urban heat island effect and climate change. It extends to crops. Here's a photo of soybean field in the Midwest of US, probably growing soybeans so that they can ship them to China or grow some livestock and ship them around the world, right? So this was a study that looked at the reduction in yield of those soybean crops under the streetlights that you can see here. These streetlights, when they're under these lights, they don't realize it's time to set their seed. and start to senesce. So their yields are reduced. In fact, their yields are reduced by up to 60% under streetlights. So this farmer has a direct economic impact because of our decision to light this street at night so maybe 1 or 2 cars every 10 minutes or so can drive past. In climate change, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I mean, most of us realize if we see a smokestack belching fumes into the atmosphere, we know that that's a visual indicator, a symbol of climate change. I think most people realize that when you see a city burning brightly all night, the energy that's being used to dry that is probably coming from fossil fuels. It's contributing directly to climate change. You know, a significant percentage of the energy used at night is simply to light our world much more brightly than it's needed. It really is just pure waste. And Mario is here, so I won't spend much time, or very little time, talking about human health, because we have some real expertise here, but we really clear, we need natural darkness, just in the same way that our fellow living creatures and wildlife and animals and plants on this planet do, both for healthy sleep, but also for inspiration. We're learning more about the power of natural darkness to inspire our imagination. Just think of those great works of art. So what's the common thread? It really is disruption of this natural cycle of light and dark. And this is a great diagram that shows just how bright the day is. 120,000 lux, maybe not in the South Island of New Zealand in the summer, but in Tucson, where I live, it's incredibly bright during the day. And on a moonless night, it's really, really dark. But on a moonless night, if there's no cloud done, you can still get around. And a couple nights ago, when the moon was full, maybe we're looking at 0.2, 0.3 lux. And anyone who's been out on a full moon knows you don't need a flashlight to get around if you allow your eyes to adapt. So the natural world, this was the range of variability for nighttime. And this is what we've done to it. There's just a fundamental disconnect between the levels we light the world at night and the level that nature was used to. And you can see this, I'm sure Mario will be talking, others will be talking about melatonin suppression as a way of affecting our fundamental biology. Melatonin is suppressed at levels that clearly are below those levels that we're lighting much of our world to, with tremendous consequences. So we need a paradigm shift here, right? We need to think about artificial light at night as pollution, as a classical pollutant, right? And it can be solved at the speed of light, much easier to solve than many of those other ones that we talk about. And this is what I'm going to talk about. It doesn't mean turning off all the lights and plunging the world into medieval darkness, right? That's not the message here. There are places where should be sacrosanct, where we should not allow lights. But there are many places where we just need to think about lighting more smartly, more responsibly. It's where our principles, responsible outdoor lighting, come in, where we developed these jointly a number of years ago with the Illuminating Engineering Society, you know, the lighting community and the darkscape community coming together and say we have some common ground here about the ways that we should be using light. And they're very top level. You know, the devil will always be the detail of how do you implement those, and I have some examples of that. But start with natural darkness, right? Illuminate it where we need it. For us, the animals and wildlife don't need light. Like, we need it. If we're there performing a particular task, then that's the task that we need to think. What's the use? What purpose are we using? Let's target it down. We're on the task where we're working, not up in the sky. Use lower levels, because our eyes can adapt. Actually, the best way of creating darkness is by shining a light in your eye, right? Your eye shut down, you can no longer see. And the last two are really possible. You know, the controllability, you can have them on when you need them, you can dim them down, you can turn them off when there's no one around, and use those warmer color lights like candlelight to reduce and eliminate where you can blue lights that are really an unnatural component of light at night. We always get asked a couple question, what about safety? Right? Right? This is the classic, I'm sure many of you have seen this, because what do people see here? Right? The standard sort of porch light on the outside with a bunch of shadows, and if you eliminate the glare, oh my goodness, there was someone hiding in the shadows all along. Right? The other one again, well, LEDs are efficient, we've solved the problem, right? And yes, LEDs are efficient, but it's all about how you use them, right? This is a church, I believe it's either in Wales or Ireland, that a lighting designer that we worked with had redesigned the lighting. This is an energy efficient solution. Nice, efficient LED bulbs. He redesigned it using efficient LED bulbs, using warmer colors and careful controls, and I happen to think it's beautiful. And if you start to look at it, like, oh, you can suddenly, there's contrast here on these. Feels much safer to get around. So we have to start breaking down some of these misperceptions out there. And I wanted to do a quick little demonstration just to kind of literally blind people. So this is an efficient, this is a little mag light, one battery, I think, mag light, probably about 1 watt, so about 150 lumens. So it's unshielded, no optics. So it is the most efficient you can get. And I want to light the road down here, but below John's big classic pathways. I'm going to do this very efficiently. Everyone okay with that? Some nice efficient lighting? How are you feeling about that, John? Glare, right. If it was dark, we'd actually see that there's a bunch of light going up, right? So I'm going to do the first thing that engineers generally do, is they put a little bit of a lens on it and do it now. Do we get more light down on the ground, John?
Yes.
And how do you feel about it?
Horrible.
Yeah, pretty horrible. Okay, I'm going to take a little shield. Look, I'm going to put a little baseball hat on it now. And let's get it right. Okay. Now, how's the light on the roadway going down there, John?
Much better.
And how do you feel about it?
Ecstatic.
Yeah, ecstatic. Right? It's pretty simple. I mean, this stuff is simple, right? I mean, and that's the message, right? I was actually improving the visibility of light on the ground, whilst at the same time I was making sure that we kept into other initiatives underway. I just want to share one example of some of the work that we're starting to do in the sort of creating best practices here. So historically, we have focused on a fixture, and you can have a fantastic fixture, but if you have misapply that fixture, you can also have a bad outcome. So we're moving more to how do you apply those fixtures to ensure you can have a good outcome, and then how does that nest up to places like Arakai Mackenzie, so we can have a whole landscape that's protected as a dark sky place. Some work we're doing initially in New Mexico, which is one of the brightest spots on the map in the United States because of the oil fields there. This looks like it is Los Angeles, and in fact it's just the Bakken, I believe, oil fields. And it's not gas flaring. This is the flare. It's warm like candlelight, ironically. This is the problem. Unshielded security lights. This is a drone flying overhead, so you can imagine how bad it would be down on the ground. They're just blasting light wherever they are, because they haven't thought about it. So we're working with some of the operators in the Oil and Gas Association there and say, look, what are your needs and how can you redesign it? And here's some early results. This is just a retrofit. So the same facility. All they did is tilted those fixtures down, right? You can see they're starting to reclaim darker areas, and from a sky glow perspective, the minute you start blasting the light up into the sky and you start, yes, you still have reflection, but you have greatly reduced the impact on sky glow for an area. We also worked with them on a design of a new facility that will be even better, and actually they came back and said, oh, you saved us $8,000 in lighting costs. We're doing it more smartly. Right, so these demonstrations will be really important. I wanted to bring it back to New Zealand, right? So New Zealand has abundant natural darkness. You also have growing areas of light pollution where the people live, and these dots are some of the darkscape places that have been established over the last 5 or 10 years. And you also have bright cities. There's Auckland, right? That's where most of the people live. So I think the opportunity to lead in an island nation like New Zealand is really here. How can we bring together policy? How can we bring together best practice, and how can we build a broad consensus, a broad community here? And I think it's critical that we also look at the urgency and the need to scale. We don't want a world where natural darkness is something you have to travel hours to be. For a variety of reasons. One reason, technical will become overrun and you'll risk damaging the thing that you're trying to protect. And Milani's going to talk about some dark sky astrotourism principles that we developed recently. So there's urgent need to scale this, and this is where we continue to evolve the concept of a dark sky nation or a dark sky territory, hopefully in collaboration with leadership here in New Zealand. What would that look like? Well, it's critical that you recognize natural darkness at a national level, a territory level, as something that's of value, and adopt the principles of responsible outdoor lighting or versions of those at the national level to cover not just the dark places, but the places where people live. We would like to see places put a bold stake in the ground, say, yes, we're going to protect and in some instances restore at least 30% of our landscape. Say at least, you have more areas, but at least 30% of it that we're dedicating to conservation. We want to ensure that natural night sky values are protected there. We're going to implement policies to do that, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable to that over time. We're going to monitor our results, we're going to share the data, and we're going to empower communities to engage in this. Again, so it's not just dark sky people versus urban people, so we need to have that broad consensus so people can understand those values and see that, what it means for them in their daily lives. And for a country where your national symbol is literally a bird that is active at night, you know, what an incredible opportunity you have, and we look forward to partnering with you. Thank you.